Willow Creek lay nestled in a valley, its quiet streets and overgrown gardens giving an impression of timeless tranquility. The town had long since been forgotten by the world, its history buried beneath layers of neglect and decay. The old houses leaned against each other like drunken old men, their windows boarded up or broken, their once vibrant facades now dulled by the passage of time. Emily Parker stood on the cracked sidewalk, staring at the house she had inherited from her grandmother. It was a grand old mansion, its Victorian architecture standing out against the backdrop of the modern world. But there was something off about it. The windows seemed to watch her, and the air around the house felt colder than the rest of the town. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself as she glanced up and down the empty street. Not a soul in sight, just the wind whispering through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. Emily sighed and turned towards the front door, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. Inside, she was greeted by the musty smell of old wood and dust. She set her bags down and looked around, trying to see the house through her grandmother's eyes. This place had been a haven for her family for generations, a symbol of their prosperity and pride. Now, it was just another decaying relic of the past. She was soon joined by Amanda Adams, a local historian, and Mark Davis, her skeptical journalist friend. Amanda had always been fascinated by the town's history, while Mark had agreed to accompany her more out of a sense of duty than any real belief in the paranormal stories she loved to chase. Amanda's eyes lit up as she stepped inside. "Emily, this place is amazing. It's like stepping back in time." Mark, less enthused, crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. "Yeah, if you like mold and cobwebs." Emily managed a weak smile. "It's been in my family for generations. I just wish it didn't feel so creepy." As they settled in, Amanda couldn't resist sharing some of the town's history. "Did you know that Willow Creek was founded by 5 families who were incredibly wealthy and powerful? They controlled everything around here, the land, the businesses, even the people." Emily nodded, having heard snippets of these stories from her grandmother. "But something happened, didn't it? Something terrible." Amanda's expression darkened. "Yes. About 200 years ago, there was a massive power struggle. The founding families turned on each other. There were rumors of betrayals, poisonings, even outright murder. The details were covered up, but it's said that the descendants of those families still live here, oblivious to their ancestors' crimes." Mark rolled his eyes. "And let me guess, the spirits of those betrayed are haunting the town, right?" Amanda shot him a look. "Actually, yes. There have been countless reports of hauntings, strange occurrences, and unexplained deaths. People say the spirits are seeking vengeance on the descendants of their murderers." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Well, that's comforting." As the sun set, Emily tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. She explored the house, room by room, hoping to find some connection to her family's past. But all she found were dusty old photographs and furniture covered in white sheets. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with thoughts of ghosts and vengeful spirits. Just as she was about to drift off, she heard it. A faint whisper, like someone speaking just outside her door. She sat up, heart pounding. "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence. Emily got up and crept to the door, peeking out into the dark hallway. Nothing. She shook her head and closed the door, telling herself it was just her imagination. But the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. Objects in her room started to move on their own. A book fell off the shelf, the curtains rustled without any breeze, and a cold spot appeared at the foot of her bed. Emily's fear grew with each passing moment. The next morning, she told Amanda and Mark about her experience. Mark was dismissive. "It's an old house, Emily. Old houses make noises." Amanda, however, was more concerned. "Emily, I think you need to hear this. I found an old diary in the town's archives. It belonged to one of the founding family members. It mentions a curse, that the spirits of those who were wronged would return to seek vengeance on the descendants of their murderers." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. You think that's what's happening to me? Amanda nodded. I think so. The spirits are trying to send a message. They're not going to stop until they get what they want. Mark sighed. Come on, Amanda. This is ridiculous. There's no such thing as ghosts. But as the day went on, even Mark couldn't deny the strange occurrences. He experienced it firsthand when a ghostly hand appeared on his office wall, leaving bloody handprints that dripped onto the floor. The reality of their situation began to sink in. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she saw it. A shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. It whispered her name, and Emily knew, without a doubt, that the spirits of Willow Creek were real, and they were very, very angry. The morning light brought little comfort to Emily, Amanda, and Mark. The air in the house felt heavier, as if the very walls were pressing in on them. Despite the bright sunlight streaming through the windows, shadows seemed to linger in every corner. Emily moved through the house with trepidation, her nerves on edge. Every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the curtains sent her heart racing. She found herself glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see the ghostly figure from the previous night at any moment. The hauntings intensified. In the kitchen, Emily watched in horror as a knife lifted from the counter and hurled itself across the room, embedding into the wall just inches from her head. She screamed, and Amanda and Mark came running. Mark experienced his own terrifying encounter later that day. While working in his makeshift office, the temperature suddenly dropped. His breath came out in visible puffs, and the room grew eerily silent. A child's laughter echoed in the air, followed by a faint whispering. Mark's skepticism evaporated as he saw bloody handprints appear on the walls, slowly making their way toward him. He bolted from the room, pale and shaking. Desperation set in as the trio realized the hauntings were only getting worse. They gathered in the living room, the air thick with tension. We need to find out more about these murders, Amanda insisted, clutching the old diary she had found. There has to be something in here that can help us. Mark, now a believer, nodded. I'll look into the town records, see if I can find any details about the families involved. Emily, feeling helpless, agreed. I'll search through the attic. There might be something up there that can give us more information. Days passed in a blur of research and fear. Amanda and Mark unearthed the gruesome details of the founding family's deaths. Poisoned dinners, stabbings in the dark, and bodies hidden in shallow graves. The more they uncovered, the more the spirits seemed to react, their anger palpable. Emily, meanwhile, discovered an old trunk in the attic, filled with mementos from her ancestors. Among them, she found a set of ritualistic items and a faded letter. The letter, written by one of her great-grandmothers, described a failed attempt to appease the spirits through a ritual. It warned that the spirits could not be reasoned with, and that their thirst for vengeance was insatiable. Despite the warning, Amanda suggested they try the ritual, hoping it might at least provide some respite. Mark and Emily reluctantly agreed, desperate for any solution. They gathered in the basement, the darkest and most foreboding part of the house. Amanda set up the ritual items, candles, incense, and a circle of salt, while Emily and Mark watched nervously. As Amanda began to chant the ancient incantation, the room grew colder. Shadows danced on the walls, and the air became thick with a sense of malevolence. The candles flickered and then extinguished themselves, plunging the basement into darkness. Suddenly, the spirits manifested in full force. The temperature plummeted, and a deafening roar filled the air. Objects flew around the room, crashing into the walls. Amanda was thrown to the ground, her body writhing as if possessed. Emily and Mark tried to help her, but an unseen force pinned them against the wall. The spirits' rage was overwhelming. They felt hands grasping at their throats, icy fingers digging into their flesh. Amanda's chanting turned into screams as the spirits invaded her mind, showing her visions of their deaths and the horrors they had endured. Just as abruptly as it started, the assault stopped. The basement was silent once more, the only sound the heavy breathing of the three friends. They helped Amanda to her feet, her face pale and haunted. "We need to get out of here," Mark said, his voice trembling. "This isn't working. We need to leave." But it was too late. The spirits had tasted their fear and anger, and they were not going to stop. That night, Emily's neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, became the first victim. A kind, elderly woman who had lived in Willow Creek all her life, she was found dead in her home. Her face was twisted in terror, her eyes wide open and staring at nothing. Ghostly handprints encircled her neck, a clear sign of the spirit's handiwork. The news of Mrs. Johnson's death spread through the town like wildfire, and fear gripped the residents. Amanda, Mark, and Emily knew they were next. The spirits were growing stronger, and there was no way to stop them. As they huddled together in the living room, the full weight of their situation settled over them. The spirits of Willow Creek were real, and they were out for blood. The trio could only wait in dread, knowing that their time was running out. The morning sun, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a mockery. The town of Willow Creek seemed to grow darker with each passing day. The atmosphere was suffocating, filled with an ominous presence that pressed down on the residents, choking any semblance of normalcy. Emily, Amanda, and Mark could feel the eyes of the town upon them. Whispers followed them wherever they went, but no one dared to confront them. Fear had taken root, and the townspeople avoided them as if they were cursed. Emily's dreams were filled with nightmares of shadowy figures and chilling whispers. She barely slept, her eyes haunted by what she had seen. She found herself staring at the old photographs of her ancestors, now seeming more like taunts than memories. Mark, now fully convinced of the supernatural threat, proposed leaving Willow Creek. "We have to get out of here," he urged, his voice shaking. "If we stay, we're as good as dead." Amanda and Emily agreed. The spirits' attacks were growing more frequent and more violent, but as they packed their bags, the house itself seemed to turn against them. Doors slammed shut, locking them in rooms. Windows shattered, cutting off their escape routes. Desperation set in. They decided to make a run for it, racing through the house and out the front door. But the spirits were waiting. The air outside was thick with a malevolent force that pushed them back, making it nearly impossible to move forward. Mark, seeing no other option, decided to distract the spirits to buy time for Amanda and Emily. "Go!" he shouted, turning back towards the house. "I'll hold them off." Emily screamed for him to stop, but it was too late. Mark charged back into the house, the door slamming shut behind him with a deafening bang. Inside, the temperature dropped drastically. Mark could see his breath misting in front of him. The house groaned and creaked, the very walls seeming to come alive. Shadows moved with a will of their own, converging on him. The spirits attacked with unrelenting fury. Mark was thrown across the room, his body slamming into the wall with a sickening crunch. He tried to get up, but unseen hands pinned him down. He could feel the cold fingers digging into his flesh, pulling at his hair, scratching at his skin. He screamed, a sound that echoed through the empty halls, filled with pain and terror. Blood trickled from his mouth, his vision blurring as the spirits tore at him. His last thoughts were of Emily and Amanda, hoping they could escape the nightmare that had consumed him. Amanda and Emily, now alone, stumbled through the streets of Willow Creek, seeking refuge. They found themselves at the old town hall, a place steeped in the town's dark history. The massive, decaying structure loomed over them, a reminder of the founding family's treacherous past. The air inside was stifling, filled with the scent of mold and decay. Shadows danced on the walls, the flickering lights casting eerie shapes that seemed to move with a will of their own. Amanda and Emily knew they had no choice but to confront the spirits here, where it all began. The spirits were waiting. The temperature dropped and the room grew darker. The whispers started again, echoing through the hall, growing louder and more insistent. The spirits manifested, their faces twisted with rage and torment. "Why?" Emily cried out, her voice breaking. "Why won't you leave us alone?" The spirit's only response was a deafening roar, the sound of 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The air grew thick with malevolence, pressing down on Amanda and Emily, forcing them to their knees. Amanda tried to speak, to plead with the spirits, but the words were lost in the cacophony of screams. The spirits surged forward, their forms solidifying into grotesque, nightmarish shapes. They reached for Amanda and Emily, their fingers like icy talons. Emily felt the cold touch of the spirits as they closed in on her, their hands wrapping around her throat. She gasped for air, her vision blurring as the pressure increased. Beside her, Amanda was dragged to the ground, her screams mingling with the spirits' roars. The town of Willow Creek returned to its eerie silence. The sun set, casting long shadows over the decaying buildings. The spirits, their thirst for vengeance momentarily sated, retreated into the shadows, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to cross their path. In the old town hall, the bodies of Amanda and Emily lay motionless, their faces frozen in expressions of abject terror. The cycle of vengeance continued. The spirits of Willow Creek forever bound to their dark history, ensuring that there would be no escape, no hope, for anyone who dared to disturb their rest.